Let's talk about masking now in AutoPano Giga. Okay, so we've got our shot here. I'm just going to do a quick color correction on this just to kind of remove those dark areas so we can see a little bit better. Okay, looking better. I'm going to switch this up here, pan around, so we can kind of get a good idea of what we're looking at. And hit apply. And we'll look at some of the issues here that we see with the stitch. So first up, I'm seeing some problems here up on this little region of the roof. It kind of seems to split in two there. We've got another weird stitch problem there. Everything else is looking pretty good, but there's some easy ways to fix these kinds of problems, or at least see what we can do about it by going into APG, AutoPano Giga. So I'm going to save this, and then this little button right here takes us over to APG. So all you need to do is just park your cursor, your scrubber here, wherever you want to be editing, and go ahead and hit edit. And then it will automatically bring up AutoPano Giga. So then all you have to do is click the edit button here, and it will give you all the options you need to be able to edit. So right off, you'll see that in AutoPano Giga, you get a blended version of your shot. So if you want to see what is being seen in AVP, all you need to do is click this button here, and it will bring up basically a preview of what you're seeing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with masking. And this is right here. So if you click Mask Edition, you can see very clearly where the separations of the cameras are. And that's obviously, you see these lines here, that's why you're experiencing those issues. So the first thing we can do is I like to hover around with my mouse, and I'm not clicking anything, I'm just kind of moving around to see where all my cameras are. And as you can see, there is this camera here, but it kind of goes up into this region as well. So even though it's not, the final stitch isn't using this camera's data right there, you can see that that's how far that camera reaches. So each camera has quite a bit of overlap, which is obviously required for 360 stuff. But other than that, you can kind of get an idea. So as you can see, we kind of have an issue here because there isn't really one camera angle that captures this entire ridge. So with masking, it's not going to be able to fix these kinds of problems very well, but we can go into another technique and I can teach you how to fix this issue. But what masking can do is it can very much fix the issue that we're seeing over here. So if you hover away and let that preview work, you can see that this region here, it's not a very good stitch. It's kind of off a little bit. And what I've found is the best way to fix these kinds of problems is to try to move the mask a little bit back and force AVP to use more of this camera, because you still have quite a bit of this. So the farther away you get from the camera, the more accurate the stitch will be in most cases, just because of the way the math works with parallax. So with masking, there's two kinds of markers. There's an add marker, like these, and a remove marker. So mostly I stick with these add and remove on this left side here. This is the add all, remove all, but mostly you'll just need the add and remove. So I like to start with the add here and basically make sure you're hovering over the camera that you want to add, right? To include, to add to the entire thing. And you can just start clicking and adding these little green spots. And you'll notice right away, even with one, it changed where that stitch line is going by quite a bit. So now you'll see that it's going all the way back there, but I don't want it to go that far. I want it to kind of maybe end right here, or it's a little bit ambiguous as where those lines are. Because if you can avoid hard lines, that's usually where you'll notice it. And you'll see right there, it's even worse than it was down below. So all we need to do is say, okay, I like where that's going, but I want to include a little bit more of this camera here. So I'm going to hover above this camera and click there. And you'll see now that our stitch line moved down a little bit, but it's still not exactly where we want it to be. So I'm going to start here again and come up and click right beneath that one. And you'll see now that we have a nice stitch line right where we want it to go. I'm also going to add a little bit more here so we see these people's faces a little bit and allow that to do its thing. Now, if you make a mistake and you want to remove a marker, it's as easy as just hovering over it, right-clicking on it, and then hitting Remove Current Marker. There's also options for removing all markers, just remove markers, keeping all the current markers. I mean, there's plenty of options there. Just added a few masks there to kind of get a little bit more of a fine-tuned stitch, and I'm really liking how that's looking. So all you have to do in order to apply those changes is hit Save Project, and we can hide APG and you'll watch down here that changed automatically and updated through AutoPano. These two things are dynamically linked, so any changes you make in here will automatically be reflected in AVP, which is really cool. I am noticing a little bit of a disconnect, a little bit of a problem down there with this post. You'll see that it kind of disappears there with that girl. So I'm gonna just experiment with this and see how this looks. Looking a little weird. I'm gonna come back up here and include some of that, maybe this too. So I kind of just want that post to be able to land a little bit better. But you should be able to get the idea that, oh, and we're seeing here as well, this guy's arm kind of gets cut off. So maybe the best place to mask or to have this stitch line end up is maybe farther over here. And since we have a little bit more of this camera to work with, I'm actually just gonna click over in these areas and pull that over there. And then maybe over here, I'll add a couple more there just to make it feel, trying to basically mask along this gate there. So we can maybe throw another one there. And it looks good. So I'm actually going to move that up a little bit. Oop. Remove that marker. Pull this one back a bit. And we'll adding there. Add one here. So you kind of see it's a little bit of a dance to sort of push and pull these lines here back and forth in APG to make them kind of work how you want them to. But once you kind of start adding and messing with these markers, you get a pretty good feel for it, and it makes sense pretty quick. So you don't need to worry too much about the complexity of it. It's quite simple to use, so we'll hit save and watch this little area here, and we'll see that the area automatically updated. Looks good. Looks much better than it did before. His arm is back. So now when we hit play, you'll see that those lines look a lot better and those stitch lines are gone. So that's masking. That's a good example of what you can do with masking, how to push and pull different masking markers. If you want to remove something, say, there's another way to do it. I prefer using adding markers because it just makes sense to me, but if you want to remove, so say we have this region here is obviously from this camera, say we want to remove as much of this as possible, you just click there and it will try to use other camera stitching instead of the one that was there before. But that one is good the way it was. But yeah, so you can choose removing markers or adding markers. Either does pretty much the same thing. You're pretty much just telling APG more of a custom way, a custom path, and where to stitch the video, where to add those seams. Because unfortunately at this time, there isn't a computer that can automatically say, oh, that's an important region. We want to make sure we're not putting a stitch line right over it, versus a region that is less important or a little bit more blurry or darker, like this little area here that we snuck that stitch line in. The computer doesn't know that. So sometimes with masking, we can edit that and customize it however we'd like. With masking up here, I think there might be something we can do to sort of help this line along here, because that seems to be sort of messing up. It's not a huge distraction, but if we can make it look a little bit better, that'll be great. Up here we have quite a bit more room, quite a bit more angle of camera to use here. So I'm gonna actually just add all of that and make sure we're using it. Because there, if we kind of keep those regions above with this mask tool, we'll be able to keep those lines a little bit better. I'll add that up there. And that looks good. Okay, so that actually moved our line over there a little bit, as you can see. So we'll move it back a little bit like that. Kind of get an idea. Boom. Okay. All right, so that looks great. Hit Command S to save it. And you'll notice that a lot of those shift around. So it looks a little bit better. There's still some problems we want to fix. And you'll find as well that with a stitch correction and fixing, there usually isn't one way to make everything look perfect. You usually have to use a mixture of the 4 ways that I've talked about. You gotta pull it into After Effects, do some, manual removing, some paint-ins, some all that kind of jazz to make it look as perfect as it can. But once you understand what each technique is good for, you'll be able to really master it and make each one of your shots look as great as they can.